Hey, this is Shane, the host of From the Shadows podcast, and I'm here with Jason, the super producer.
Greetings, everybody.
And the one and the only resident skeptic, the Ozark Howler.
Hey, I'm here.
Can you guys tell the excitement of the Howler?
Well,
no, all right.
you know me, man. I try to under-promise and over-deliver, right? So I don't need catchy. Hey, I don't need catchy phrases. I don't need snappy hooks. Ain't no clickbait with me. Okay, it's the real deal.
There you go.
Well, for all of our new listeners, since we're a new member of the Odyssey Radio Network, we'd like to invite everybody to stick around after this short intro and check out what we like to call the Midweek Howl. And what the Midweek Howl is it's just our little story time with the Ozark Howler, in which we try to lighten your week up a little bit with a 10-15 minutes of laughter. So stick around, laugh with us, enjoy the stories. No harm, no foul. So just be ready to go to a world that you probably hoped didn't exist in the world.
And expect to be entertained.
Expect to be entertained. So you got it. Do you have any warnings or?
No, you know what though, I wasn't. But what I was going to say is, so maybe after I just told you there's a hook, there's no hook, there's a hook. You know, I think I said it earlier on the last one I did with you guys. You know, I got a story for almost everything. You know, because I was on the street for almost 30 years, so I got a story for everything. So if you got a subject, send it to From the Shadows podcast, and I'll tell you a story about
it. Yeah. And for those new listeners, the Howler has 30 years of being a sheriff, a highway patrolman, air marshal, a homeland security, and probably a lifetime of just being an all-around funny dude. So
redneck, man, redneck. There you go, redneck.
So we hope that you give us a little segment a chance and go check out the Howler. And like you said, if you got some stories that you guys are interested in, asking about, or if
he's going to have to send it to you guys because I'm not on social media, so it's got to go.
Yeah, he's not on social media. So if you really want to say some good stuff about him, we'll share it with him. If you say some bad stuff about him, don't waste your time. He won't ever hear it. He's kind of fragile, so we won't let him. So with that, thanks for welcoming us onto the Odyssey Radio Network, and we hope that you enjoy the show. So Howler, you were telling me a story the other day, and I don't know whether you were telling me the story because I'm a mailman, and my disdain for dogs, and
barking dogs, not just dogs, barking dogs.
Yeah, barking dogs. Okay, yeah, let's get that. It's not that I don't like dogs. I don't like dogs that are yipping at me all the time, and so obviously we don't want our listeners to think that we're anti-dogs because we all like dogs.
Yeah, we've all been married.
Yeah, I mean,
That's terrible.
Oh man, come on, man.
That is okay. Yeah, that was tasteless.
But,
I should have said that.
But I mean, I appreciated this story. I think our listeners that know what we're all about when it comes to the Ozark Howler stories appreciate this story. So
yeah, but you got to put that disclaimer in. Some people will find it was upsetting to me, and I'm trained at many levels to deal with upsetting things. So you got to put a disclaimer out there that this is an upsetting story, and people might not want to listen to it.
Okay, anybody that's listening now, if you don't,
you're a dog lover.
If you're a dog lover and will take offense to a story,
I don't know about offense. It's just upsetting. It's just the whole scenario is upsetting.
Well, let's face it. The world in general is very upsetting every day. Facebook doesn't have a disclaimer when you log in. It says, "Hey, if you're at risk of being upset, turn back now."
Oh, so, see, I'm not on Facebook, so I don't know what that is. So, I mean, I don't know those things. But
okay, well, I think everybody's figured out by now. If they're going to get upset, then maybe they shouldn't keep listening. But I think we probably got a lot of listeners this week, so maybe they want to give it a try.
Okay,
So,
let's roll with it. I mean, you tell me to tell the story, I'll tell the story.
Tell the story. Jason's never heard it. So pretend it's just Jason. Okay. It may just be Jason. Listen to the story.
I have many stories for the flood of '93. Remember here in the Midwest, we had a giant flood.
Oh yeah,
and it just led to one story after another story after another story. Well, there was a little town where I used to work called Osage City, and it got flooded out. And in the flood of '93, I guess. So this has been about '94-ish. So what happened is, when the water subsided, those streets are still there in a lot of places, but only about not even a third, probably a fourth or a fifth of the original dwellings were left. Right. So you'd have streets with mostly trailers or old turn of the century river type houses, and then 5 or 6 empty lots, and then another trailer and 5 or 6 empty lots. So, but when the place was flooded, all those people had to go somewhere else. So most of them moved, what we call, you would say out here in the country, they moved to town. So they all moved to town. Well, there was a gentleman down there that had, I believe it was 7 Sheltie dogs, little white Shelties. You know what white Sheltie fluffy dogs look like. Mm-hmm. And he took them to town. There's a joke in law enforcement, especially back then, was people moved to the county to do 2 things: own dogs and shoot guns, because they're tightly regulated inside the city limits. But out in the county, the dogs run wild, and people shoot guns, and that's just the way it is. So unfortunately, the 7 Sheltie owner moved 7 Shelties into town, and he started getting in problems. And I don't know what kind of problems he had, but what he decided to do with those 7 Shelties was go back to his river house that had been flooded, and Mother Nature deflooded it. The water just subsided. So he gave each one of those little dogs their own room there on the kind of the main floor of the house. And he staked a couple of them out on the yard. I don't know why some of them got in the house and some of them were on chains in the yard, but that's just the way it worked.
I mean, now at this point in the story, this sounds great. Like, what dog wouldn't want full run of
his whole house? I mean, you want to talk about dog house? I mean, these guys had a 2-story dog house, right?
Nice.
So, and this old boy, this is what those some people. It takes a lot of years to get to where you can just smoke cigarettes and watch cars go by. Other people are able to do it at a younger age. Okay. So this old boy would just go down there and hang out with his dogs, watch the river go by, watch the grass grow. They were never neglected. Okay.
You have just given me at least 3 hooks for new country songs. Smoking cigarettes and watching cars go by. That's a great. I'm right.
Anyway, unfortunately, a couple of vacant lots away in his mother's trailer was a 40-plus-year-old convicted felon on parole. So remember when I said some people find out a way at an earlier age to figure out how to just hang out and smoke cigarettes? The real smart ones had the ability to figure that out without being in confinement, without being in jail. Okay, so anyhow, those little dogs that had a barking problem in town, they took that barking problem back to the doghouse. And this guy, in a redneck Son of Sam version, didn't like the way those dogs were barking at him all the time, or just barking. So he did what people do out here in the country, convicted felons in the country. He got his dad's deer rifle because he can't have one. And it was a 30-30. And the reason why six rounds stay in my brain, because they'll put 6, I think it's 30-30 holding 7, 6 in the tube, 1 in the magazine, or 1 in the barrel. Well, what they do is they fill the magazine tube up, but they don't want to put one in the chamber because they just want to be half unsafe. They don't want to be totally unsafe. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So anyway, this old boy went over and robbed those Shelties of their life. Okay, all but one, because he ran out of shells. He walked around that house and started shooting those little barking dogs. unfortunately for him, another anomaly out in the world, when you start shooting dogs, somebody calls 911. So,
Right.
As they should.
Yeah.
as well, you know, in certain things, you know, yeah. So anyway, that was when I was young in my prime, and I roll on up, and I'm a dog lover, first and foremost. Okay, so I arrested him, and I threw the book at. I didn't. I used the tools were given to me. I know that the fourth wheel of the podcast ain't here, and he'll tell you that the prosecutors who throws the book at people, or the judge throws the book at people. But I did everything I could to reintroduce this guy back to the criminal justice, and by using all these in the early '90s, there was all these drive-by statutes that were designed to curtail drive-by shootings. You know, firing into residences. And so anyway, I hooked this guy up and returned him back to the custody of the state of Missouri. But back to these dogs, all of them succumbed to their injuries with the exception of there was one, you know, and I like to joke, you know, Marcus Luttrell is obviously the lone survivor, but prior to that was this white Sheltie dog down there on the river, because he was able to survive that onslaught, and that owner, prior to this, he gave each dog their own room and had them boarded up. Well, he opened up the doghouse, and this little dog had its run of the whole house, and it was an old 2-story house. The windows had been, you know, when they go to flood, they think it's going to flood, they open all the windows and doors so the water doesn't take them out, you know. So all the windows and doors was open, but he had a piece of plywood over the front to keep his dog confined. And from then on, that dog was kind of a local celebrity for a little bit because he had survived the shootout, you know, the Sheltie shootout, and it was nervous around people, you know, understandably. So I'd pull up in my cop car and look up there, and that little dog, and Sheltie's pretty high strung anyway. He had run about 5 or 6 circles, jumping, and then he would run all the way upstairs, and he would jump out of the upstairs window onto the front porch, and like an elevated position, like you can't get me. So, and then, you know, I'd throw him something. You know, I was a junk food eater back then, and you know, I'd throw him half a hamburger or something, you know, whatever I was eating. And but yeah, I don't know what quadruple's 4. What's 6?
I have no idea. Too many.
It was a Sheltie shootout at 94 right down there on the river.
I love the name of it.
So you guys are both in law enforcement. So let me ask you, this struck me as you're sending him back into the prison system, and I know there's a special feeling amongst the incarcerated for certain
crimes. Well, you know, I used to joke all the time that, you know, some folks just need shot. I know that sounds terrible for me to say, but there's very, very few dogs, and certainly Shelties, that need to be shot. So I could only imagine that in the system there was a dog lover out there who had a mother or grandmother that had a little dog that, you know, when the whole world turns against you, the only people you can count on is your little dog and your mom or your grandma. So I could only imagine he tried to keep that heinous crime quiet as long as he could.
Yeah, but how long could you keep that quiet?
I don't think you could, because what had happened is, I mean, everybody would know, especially, you know, the place I work, we had 3 prisons in that county. I mean, this Sheltie shootout it took place 2,000 yards from a prison that's been a prison since the 1850s, 60s.
So in other words, every time that guy walked into the lunchroom, everybody started probably barking like a dog. He's walking down from the cell.
If he's lucky.
If they can get away with it, yeah.
If he's lucky, that's all they did.
Right.
Oh, man.
You know, I don't know. Yeah, it's just a sad world down there, you know.
Well, let's just say that he might have ended up as somebody else's pet for retribution.
Yeah.
For a long time.
Well, so is there a more warm, fuzzy, feel-good story out of the Great Flood of 95?
Yeah, hey, I'll tell you my favorite one. And I know you said you're going to air this. There's people down in Texas. Now, I've been to Texas a few times, you know, and there's a few AR-15. Now, this is back in the day when this is pre-AR-15 fad. You know what I mean? So the Corps of Engineers closed the river to navigation. So the only people that could be out there were law enforcement. So they would have us out there in these boats driving around, making sure nobody else was out there. So that's kind of one of the anomalies. Law enforcement, you got to do what they tell other people not to do. But these what?
That's just all parts of the government, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's just kind of one of the unexplained anomalies that happen. So there's all this stuff floating. And when I say all this stuff, I mean sometimes caskets, sometimes, just buckets. I mean, early on there was houses.
Float. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, floating. Mm-hmm. So anyway, these two game warden buddies of mine, it's not my story as much as theirs, because in railroad ties sometimes they'll float end up. So all you'll see is the top 10 or 12 by 12 inches, you know what I mean? Because maybe something's on the bottom of it, or one end's got more creosote than the other, whatever, and they float and end up. So you got to watch all this debris when you're out there. So these guys dodged what they thought was a railroad tie or a telephone pole, one or the other. And as they went by, the older one realized something was up, so he spun back around, and it was a 10 or 12 inch piece of black PVC with a cap on the end. So he pulled that up, and it was capped on the other end, and it was somebody's. And this is back in 90. Like I said, this is a flood of 93. So it was a what we'd call a pre-band Colt SP1 carbine that some survivalist out there had buried. You know what they'll do is they'll take them apart, they'll put them in a vacuum. They'll get a vacuum sealer. They'll take the parts, or they'll take the whole thing, and they'll vacuum seal it, and they'll put it in a piece of PVC and cap the ends, and they take a post hole digger, and they can dig a post hole and bury it straight up, and then they bury it. That's the way how you really cache. This is pre-YouTube. Now every survivalist and prepper that I know puts their shit on YouTube. But back in the old days, they would bury it in the backyard somewhere. So anyway, because it's got air in it, when the water flooded, it floated up. He didn't have it buried very deep, and it had the ability to just float up. And this old boy found it, and he went to the prosecutor and says, "Hey, I found this. Well, how can I claim it?" Or, and they ran an ad. He ran an ad in the paper, I think, for 45 days. And I forgot what exactly it said, and nobody claimed it. And to this day, I mean, he's passed on now, but I'm sure he died in possession of this. But so all you preppers out there in East Texas, where it floods sometimes, burying your AR-15s, you got to either anchor them or put a big rock or something on top of it, because they'll float away and somebody else will get
it. Hey, listen. You never know what kind of great advice you're going to get for end of the world times when you tune
here.
Right here. When you turn into
because what's going to happen? One of two things: you can either prepare for the end of the world on what I have to say, or some people would say the paranormal's coming back, or Bigfoot would be the end of the world. So they can listen to you guys and hear how you're going to prepare for that.
If we can put in some good jerky recipes, well, then we'll have covered the gambit.
Yeah, well, I generally just take mine down to the processor and pay that. I know it's an exorbitant rate at $3 or $4 a pound. Yeah. I don't know what he does, but he does. I tried the dehydrator. I've tried everything, and I can't make it taste. It must be the money he mixes in with it or something.
That must be what it is.
Because he can beat me every time.
Well, hey, there you go to all our listeners, especially the first-time listeners. Send us your best beef jerky, best home
or sausage recipe.
Yeah, good sausage recipe. Yep.
Yeah, especially to segue. Well, I know there's a lot of deer hunters out there where you guys are.
Oh yeah.
And then you get down. Oh yeah, and then you get down where this is going to play here in the next couple of weeks. I know there's probably some Cajun down there that's got a recipe or two. Put it there.
Feel free to contact From the Shadows podcast and send them up and share them.
Hey, put it in English. Hey, tell them Cajuns down there in East Texas, you got to put it in English because we don't parle français here.
Oui. Ladies and gentlemen, a final word. please visit us on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/From the Shadows Podcast, and on our Instagram page at instagram.com/From the Shadows Podcast. You can visit our webpage at FromTheShadowsPodcast.GoDaddySites.com, or contribute to our Facebook discussion page called After the Shadows, and tweet us on our Twitter feed at twitter.com/podcast_from. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you all. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.